It resembles a sexy monkey on Thebers that are parallel. Johnny Carson was a victim of Joan Rivers. When ratings dropped, she salvaged his show. Fell. She was his frequent visitor. Host. She then made one joke in 1986 that made all the difference. The face of Carson froze. She was banned within days, forever, from The Tonight Show. For 28 years, no one ever brought up her name. Once more, Carson was not the only one who was banned. That night, what she said wasn't evident about him, but she lost everything as a result. The largest feud in Hollywood began with a few moments of humor. The birth of Joan Rivers on June 8, Joan Alexandra Malinsky, Brooklyn, New York, 1933. Her parents, Mir Malinsky and Beatrice Warushin, Jewish immigrants, are attempting to create a better life. Meyer was a esteemed physician, but what really made him he was quick-witted that piercing their house was full with laughter, and Joan took it in at a young age. In the laughter and the harsh reality of 1930s Brooklyn became a coping mechanism for their family. 4 jokes weren't just for show. Joan. It evolved into a weapon, a shield, and ultimately her finest present. As Joan battled her weight as a child, in a society that valued thinness, she didn't feel at home. However, rather than she used it as a way to hide from that anguish. She joked about dieting while on stage. Catastrophes, and a sense of alienation. Although audiences chuckled, more than that, they witnessed a woman with the courage to say their inner sensations. During the 1960s, when there weren't many female comedians, Joan's honesty broke down walls. She demonstrated that it was okay to mock our shortcomings and inch-shy. Did this to create opportunities for the future. Generations. Joan's schooling was amazing. She received her degree from Barnard English degree from college in 1954, anthropology and literature. But she had a secret as well. She frequently asserted she received her summa cum laude degree and participated in Phi Beta Kappa. These assertions weren't true. They nevertheless reflected something deeper, the amount of pressure that must be applied honestly in a universe that didn't normally honor women, particularly in amusement. Joan sought to demonstrate if it meant bending the rules for herself. The truth. She changed her name from Joan. To Joan Rivers. Malinsky wasn't merely about making a better sound. Tony Rivers, her agent, proposed it, and Joan was aware that it was the excellent action. A name such as Rivers was simpler to schedule, simpler to recall, and less likely to encounter prejudice. Having said that identity, she appeared on stages in Nutha nightclubs in York and made people pay attention. Joan Rivers wasn't your typical humorist. She was fearless, brave, and not to be forgotten. But there was no success. Quick. For 7 long years, Joan playing at tiny smoke-filled bars in Village of Greenwich. From the middle of the 1950s, Toshi was rejected in the early 1960s. Following rejection, on numerous evenings she was jeered as they left the stage. Owners of clubs didn't think a woman may be successful in stuff. She made very little or nothing. However, she continued. Those difficult years strengthened her sense of humor and fortified her. When she eventually made her breakthrough, she made it for more than herself. She demonstrated that women might prosper in the hardest rooms for comedy. Her major break arrived because of a surprising ally. In following 7 unsuccessful auditions, in 1995 Joe got her time on The Tonight Show at last. Displays she was seen by Bill Cosby. The producers were persuaded to give her a The guy must be better than her, he joked. You had last night. Joan made an appearance on February 17 during Bellator. 10 minutes of the performance. The slot and nobody desired it, yet she transformed it into, according to Johnny Carson, you're going to become famous. Suddenly, everything was different. Offers came flooding in, and Joan appeared 9 more times on the same year's show. Joan's connection became stronger with The Tonight Show. She created history in 1983 as the first male to take up the role as permanent guest host. Late-night television had been the world of man. However, Joan intervened, controlled the stage, and demonstrated that she belonged. She served as an inspiration to women everywhere to set higher goals. However, Joan had always had suspicions. She was given that part by NBC after they noticed she is safe, Carson is not in danger. That Joan's miscalculation paid off. Over the course of 2 decades, Joan was featured on almost 100 times on The Tonight Show. She produced people make fun of politicians, celebrities, as well as herself. Her voice was incorporated into her bold style and American culture ecolored, the path for other people. The work of Joan Rivers, the first marriage, was a dream come true. In record time, it became a nightmare. She wed James Sanger Eyre in 1957. To the success of the Bond clothes store. On paper, it appeared flawless. However, the real idiot hard and came out quickly. Sanger had concealed an important information. He has no desire tokens. Joan had always envisioned buying a mother. Thus, this secret seemed to a profound betrayal. The union hardly lasted for 6 months. In 1958, it was cancelled later. Joan jokingly said that it took 6 months longer than necessary. She wasn't broken by her brief marriage. Spirit. It forced her to make a fresh start. She returned home, critically examined her life, and made the decision to pursue something new. That choice sparked her acting career and doomer, permanently altering her life. And Joan married Edgar Rosenberg in 1965. To the public, they appeared to be the ideal imaginative group. However, behind closed doors, Joan was forthright about matters that most people would have remained silent. In a 2012 Howard Stern interview, she alleged having extramarital encounters during union. She mentioned a one-night in the 1960s stand with Robert Mitchum, immediately following their appearance on The Tonight Perform as a group. In 1971, while she was Fun City's Broadway run, she claimed she had a passionate relationship with Gabriel Dell. She left Edgar because it was so severe. For a few weeks, she even made a joke, but nobody was aware of its veracity. Regarding liaisons with John F. and Johnny Carson, Kennedy, people were taken aback. Her openness destroyed the perception of the devoted wife and demonstrated how her private life was complex. And always the comedian, Joan even turned hair affairs into her performance. However, Joan's reinvention began long before Thefome. At the age of 8, she produced a different personality. Her name was J. Meredith Sandra. This wasn't only a guy. As a child, Joan Malinsky, in Brooklyn, felt inferior to her older sister. The harsh remarks of her mother, her appearance struck a deep chord. Sandra, J. Joan, used Meredith as a means of escape. This new self-wassel she aspired to be. Lovely, self-assured, and gifted. That early creation demonstrated Joan's planned spending, changing how she is perceived, whether through ambition, comedy, or surgery. The longing for affection and acceptance her to the pinnacle. That Joan occasionally stretched because of the same necessity. The reality, she frequently asserted that summa cum laude received her degree from Barnard was a member of Phi Beta Kappa while in college. Neither was accurate. Yes, she graduated, but without distinction, and she never appeared in Phi Beta Kappa. She also shared a crazy account of kissing Barbara Streisand from the Driftwood play. However, as noted by biographers, they weren't Tevin simultaneously on stage. Joan's falsehoods were not innocuous. They were a component of her strategy to construct a larger, greater visibility in a society where looks were everything. From Joan had trouble with her as a child. Wait, the harsh comparisons made by her mother haunted her. As she rose to fame, the pressure to be flawless only increased. Joan resorted to plastic surgery and more. By her own estimation, she was performed on her stomach, breasts, and nose, arms, lips, and eyes. Botox turned into a standard. Following Edgar's 1987 suicide, Joan's struggle grew more intense. She evolved. She concealed her bulimia for years, and she used black humor when writing her book about injuring herself, attempting to laughing helps you cope. However, behind the jokes were a huge hassle. Her struggle with body image never really went away. In 1986, Fox arrived with a proposal that too wonderful to be true. It seemed they desired Joan will be hosting her own late-night program. The transaction was valued at $15 million over $40 million or more in today's cash. It was a historic event. Not a single lady had never had the opportunity, and Fox agreed to appoint Edgar as producer. Joan was unable to stop it. However, there was a capture. Edgar asked her to keep it a secret. Johnny Carson, regarding the agreement, he was afraid prior to the Fox Carson would interrupt her. He even went on the air. Joan listened in the hopes that safeguard her future. However, Carson was deceived by the fact that he learned of the news from the media. He never talked to her once more. The companionship Joan was prohibited from for almost 30 years. Tonight's show, the Fox's deal had been handled in secret. Joan was afraid. She did not trust Fox completely, and she was unwilling to enrich Carson prior to the final agreement. She had already been passed over by NBC for Carson's job, which made her feel stuck. When he eventually attempted to contact Carson, he refused to answer her phone. When it was too late, when the news broke, the harm was finished. Carson's rage wasn't limited to regarding the business decision. Joan thought it went farther. She believed Carson felt he had found her, thus he possessed her. He was unable to believe she dared not to depart from him, particularly as a woman. While the departing male comics received his blessing, Joan was excluded. The conflict turned into a legend. The guests from the A-list she counted pals disappeared. The telephonist's eyes to ring the red carpets where he curled up and withdrew. Everyone was aware, but why? Carson dominated late-night television like aching. Additionally, he clarified that anyone would never dare to appear on Rivers' show. Welcome back on The Tonight Show. This was more than just a danger. It was a Hollywood complied with the order. The Rivers watched with disbelief as individuals she trusted abandoned them out of loyalty or fear. With great fanfare, her show premiered. However, the vacant seats were occupied by celebrities. Ought to have been the sabotage glaringly clear. The harm didn't stop there. A few Fox affiliates declined to broadcast her program at all. These regional and BC didn't even own the stations, but Carson's hold was so strong that worried about the consequences of crossing him. They feared being cut off from afar, missing out on NBC's Tonight Show or promotional offers. Consequently, Rivers Show found it difficult to even air in regions of the nation. The holes in her ratings were destroyed by coverage before she had a chance at all. In the background, Fox also began to turn against her. Only 7 after several months of that enormous contract, they called for her to fire her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, the program's maker. They held him accountable for the shoes, however. Rivers declined. Edgar wasn't only her creator, he was her husband, her spouse. She refused to betray him. The network was unconcerned. They sacked both of them in May 1987. And the subsequent hit was considerably more brutal. 3. Edgar passed away months after losing the show. Through suicide, Rivers was broken. Though the job she battled for was destroyed, both her personal and professional lives, it was best expressed by her words. My professional background was in Threstroom. My contracts in Vegas were gone. NBC and Carson have released such awful public relations for me. I was shunned. No, she would be booked. Nobody would come back, she calls. Her name was removed from The Tonight Show. Her records were tugged. Her picture was deleted, even after the band survived Carson's retirement in 1992. Continue. For another 22 years, she wasn't permitted close to the show that has already made she's a star. It wasn't until 2014 that Jimmy Fallon ends decades by inviting her back. Of quiet. In 1987, on August 14th, Joan Rivers' entire world collapsed. Her spouse Edgar Rosenberg was discovered at the age of 2, died in a hotel room in Philadelphia. 62 Edgar had committed suicide. Only 3 months before he and Joan was let go from Fox, following the starring Joan Rivers, The Late Show fell apart. It had meant so much to watch the show, to Joan. The change was anticipated to occur late. TV at night for eternity. Edgar had consistently been her best friend, her rock, and the man who managed things behind the scenes. However, he had been silent, suffering. In 1984, following a heart attack, his health never fully recovered. The drugs, the tension, and the embarrassment losing his work, forced him to delve further into depression. He left recordings for Joan, their daughter, who is 19 years old, along with his business associate. High attempted to clarify such tapes, why he felt burdensome. The news broke. Joan is like a blast of lightning. She had conversed with Edgar the previous day. He had been discussing dinners, literature, and even intends to visit Los Angeles again. Indication of who he was had been present. Preparing. Nancy Reagan, the First Lady, called Joan herself. She contributed to the creation of plans to return Edgar's body home. The suffering was unbearable, and the press wouldn't abandon her. Joan was abandoned, fragmented, perplexed, and more isolated than she had been. However, the nightmare didn't stop there. Following Edgar's passing, Joan learned the entire scope of their financial collapse. Edgar was defeated. All through poor financial decisions. Joan wasn't simply impoverished. Her debt was $37 million. It was difficult to accept. For many years, she had entrusted their funds to Edgar while she concentrated on her task. Now she discovered she didn't even possess her own name no more. Ruthless business associates had taken over the management of her brand and spent all of the company's funds. At 54, Joan was forced to sell her beloved, the Bear Mansion. That 7,700 square foot home feat of recollections sold for over $5 million. She lived there with Edgar. Simply did a joint renovation. The embarrassment cut deep. Joan was unable to even sell her jewelry. She was unable to show up on television in her own name. Eventually, the men who had robbed her left. Jail time, but the damage was already done. Joan would live with the burden of debt for the remainder of her existence. The burden of Los Angeles was almost devastated by financial ruin. Enduring the gloomy months following Edgar's passing, Joan had had enough. She took a seat. Armed and alone, in that deserted mansion laying down on her lap. The home that formerly it seemed like a reverberation of laughter. Tomb. No one answered the phones. The invitations ceased. Friends disappeared. Melissa didn't even approach. Joan felt unnoticeable. Later on, she stated, I was a non-person, a pariah. At one time, what's the point? I asked myself. Foolish. The idea of putting an end to everything seems to be the sole option. The sorrow, the loneliness, and disgrace. It felt to handle. Then something unexpected occurred. Spike, Joan's dog, her small Yorkshire dog, leaped. He took a seat, just on top of Fagin. That small, devoted dog yelled at Joan. She glanced at him in desperation, and believed, no one will look after if I leave him. Spike wasn't even. He was hers and pleasant to everyone else, all the way through. That instant, as despite its little size, Joan saved her life. Put down the gun. Ever since she talked candidly about her saddest hour, according to her, even in the worst, there are moments when you must wait. The most trivial explanations, such as a cat hook on, keep you alive if you need it. Her story proved those who were feeling lost hope, but the suffering that Joan endured didn't end with Edgar's passing, or the financial difficulties. Loss also shattered her relationship with Melissa was drowning at the age of 19, in sorrow and rage. She accused Joan of feud had transpired with her father, remained silent for almost a year, were too damaged to support one another. Joan understood it. She then stated, Melissa blamed us, she wasn't going to say anything to me at the coffin. Their mutual silence was rife with pain. What at last brought them back together was anaphylaxis. Melissa discovered that she was in an ambivalent partnership. When she called, Joan asked for assistance without hesitation. Their healing process began then. They overcame the anguish together. Both of them then turned, become supporters, of preventing suicide. Melissa turned into the Hirsch Health mental health co-chair suicide prevention and services told their tale in an effort to combat stigma regarding suicide as well as to assist others. Joan Rivers had it everything before nearly losing it. Overnight, her Fox late-night appearance in 1987 show fell apart, and her spouse Edgar Rosenberg committed suicide. Joan was abandoned and desolate. The same Hollywood, which once praised her, no turned away. NBC and Johnny Carson ensured that she was treated as soixante. There, Joan called her this time. Death in the workplace. She went from packed Vegas performances and a guest host at day begging for stage time on The Tonight Show height. Small comedy theaters. The agony was intolerable. On several evenings, she attempted to make light of Edgar's passing only to be jeered off the stage, yet she persisted in continuing. She confronted the humiliation and fueled her performance with it. It was dubbed her Merry Widow Tour, and it almost caused her to break. But it also strengthened her. She took action that no other the female comedian took a risk and turned her most profound tragedy into humor, and that bravery would result in an